Okay, we're going to get started. I just want to welcome everybody to the Outdoor Talk. I'm your host, Karol Weyman. We're sitting down with Louise Andrade from Heritage Landscape Supply, and we're going to talk about tools and strategies that help landscape professionals make every drop count for water. It's such an important topic. For years it's been an important topic, but now we have some solutions that really, really help out. Um, so. Um, I excited to be here again. Louise is here from Heritage Landscape Supply. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so honored to be with you guys today, and especially to talk about a topic such as water, right? Such an
Yes,
important
and with your
commodity.
history, we're going to learn so much. So this is exciting. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Heritage?
Of course. Heritage Landscape Supply actually started about 7 years ago. Um, and I joined the company about 4.5 years ago. I've been the district manager in the state of Texas. Prior to that, though, I worked in the irrigation since I can remember actually. Um, it's over 30 years of irrigation experience. About 20 of those years I spent it in as a specification manager, working with cities and architects and engineers, working on some cool projects like green walls and smart water controllers and moisture sensors and ET flow meters, all of that good stuff that helps us conserve some water. That's why I'm so excited, if you can tell, to talk about this topic today.
Yes, we're so excited for you to be here. So we're going to get started. Why is smarter water management such an important conversation for today's landscape professionals?
You know, for me, it's the importance, and I don't know that there's many other things out there that we can do without, such as water, right? We can make it longer without food than we can water, but only 1% of the world's water is available to us. 3% of it is fresh water, but I think it's like 2% it's in like the glaciers. And then the rest, the other 97% is salt water. And I don't know why, but it's one of those things that we tend to ignore uh, because we think that there's such an abundance of it, but it really isn't. 1% is not a big number.
It's a finite amount, really, and that's very true.
And so if if it's one of those resources that we need to, always be concerned and always be a good stewards, because we all have children, or some of us might have grandchildren, right? And we want them to have a good future. We want them to have clean water. So to me, it is a priority to do my part to make sure that we conserve water. And as technology becomes available, that we cross that chasm earlier and embrace technology to help us conserve water.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So how do we, how do we handle this? How do we um, cut water waste and costs for this?
It's not as hard as it seems, right? I mean, but we do have to do our part. And saving water could be as simple as you going out into your yard, taking your smartphone, turning on your sprinkler system, and timing and see how long it takes before you start seeing some runoff. Most people just go to the irrigation controller and they go 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30, 40, without any rhyme or reason. And it's something that simple can help you conserve so much water, because if the water's running off, then the soil's not using it. So why put it down?
Right. And you can damage the rest of the soil with the runoff. There's a lot of, negativity that comes with that as well.
Correct. Because you're washing things off instead of allowing the root to utilize such a special resource.
Yeah. And some of the other things on here. So how do we support healthier landscapes?
If we proper water our landscape, we are going to have healthier root mass. Most irrigation systems, we run to the top 2 inches. And what happens is just like any other muscle, right? We're only applying water at the top because we're applying too much too frequently and there's runoff takes place. Water's not filtrating down into the soil. So the roots don't have reason to go deeper. But if we utilize the right tools and we allow the roots to do their job, then we're able to hold more water because there's a larger root mass and the plants become healthier. All of a sudden, we go to a drought situation, those deeper roots are going to be able to keep that plant healthier for a longer period of time than a root that only has a plant that only has a root of 2 inches. You're going to see the stress right away. They're going to start dying. If we only done our due diligence, we could have prevented.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And how does that add long-term value for the clients?
Well, cost savings, right? Healthier plant material. If you're not having to replace your plants, and uh, I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than a beautiful landscaping because it helps us a beautiful, well-maintained landscaping. It helps the ambience. It helps us change how we feel. I've seen it to where somebody could be having a bad day and you put them in the middle of a beautiful garden that you start within 10, 15 minutes, you start seeing a smile in their face. And so it's not complicated to keep a lush, beautiful landscaping without wasting water, but we have to do our part.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. So, um, what are the most common watering mistakes you see in residential and commercial landscapes? There's a few here that you've highlighted.
Yes. So watering too long, too often is the number one culprit, right? I remember we were working on this cool project. It's actually called Church in a Day, where they built a church in 24 hours. 350 people come together, and they literally built a church building in 24 hours. And in this project, obviously, you can imagine, right? In 24 hours, we didn't have the time to do the right soil prep to lay the grass. And so we had equipment, we had 350 people walking uh, through this property. And so that soil couldn't be more compacted. And we laid the grass, we put an irrigation system. But one of the things that we did is knowing what we know, we went to the controller, we changed the run times, we took our phone and we notice and see how long it took before runoff. So instead of running 15 minutes straight every day or every other day, what we did was we said, wait a minute, after 3 minutes, we start seeing runoff. So we ran multiple cycles, 3 minutes. And then, so we allowed the system to go full circle for 3 minutes. And then we came back and did it again. But then we only did it like twice a week. And what was interesting about this is that the vendor had donated the product and they wanted to test the product and see how it did in the field. So 2 years later, a year or 2 years later, we went and we pulled some of those components to send it back to the factory so they can test them and see how the product have done in the field. But much to my surprise, when we were digging those heads, our root mass was so deep and the grass and the landscaping was so healthy. While everybody else had water running down the curve, we were not doing that because we were properly using the products that we have available. And we had an incredible result by just following some simple steps.
That is so smart. And it's with all the smart, all the great electronics and technology that we have, you don't have to worry about this. I remember one time when I was young, I was walking with my friend and we noticed it was a drought in Chicago area, and every other house could only be doing their sprinkler every other day. And everyone cares about their lawn so much and their plants 'cause they spent all this time, and people would like they weren't timing anything. They're just so happy to run their sprinklers. And there was definitely runoff and there was definitely chaos. There was almost like flooding in one little area because of it. And so we used to call us, we were this on sprinkler patrol. And when people were in violation, we'd go, this is before phones that had cameras, we had no cameras. We would just go and sneak and shut off their water because it was inefficient. They were like flooding things. They were doing, it was such a poor way of handling a drought situation when they're trying to work with the city, et cetera. So I see that point entirely. So the ease of being able to regulate this now, so many years later, is pretty cool because there's no need, just with a little education, a little prep, you can make it so much easier to manage that.
Nowadays with all the cameras and social media, there'll be a lot of memes about you out there somewhere.
There probably are anyway. I do crazy things, but that's all good. That's all
But
good. Yeah.
but
Um,
it's interesting you brought that up because cities like San Antonio, uh, a neighbor can actually call a particular number to turn in their neighbor that is watering on an off day, and they actually get a ticket. In California, there's another area. I don't recall which city it is, but the inspector drives by every day, and if he sees water on the sidewalk, automatic fine. And if he comes back in 2 days and he sees your house and it's got water on the sidewalk again, you get another fine. So there are some things that are being done to try to prevent us from doing the wrong thing.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, yeah, there's it's very serious. It's a very serious business and we know so much more now than we did and it's it's important. So the next one on the list, using one schedule for every zone.
Yeah, so as I was alluding to earlier, right?
Okay.
Most people don't make any changes. They just go. I don't even understand whose idea it was to just come up with 10 or 15 minutes because there isn't
Okay.
such thing. You know, uh, every controller, even before smart controllers, there was multiple start times in cycle and soak in the other controllers that uh, this shouldn't have been an option to where they just put 10 minutes all the stations. That's just somebody being lazy.
For sure, for sure. That makes sense. So one of the common mistakes is missing leaks and poor coverage.
Well, yes. So these are both very critical, right? Because if you have leaks, again, you're wasting one of our most precious resources. But also having the wrong coverage, it's as bad as having a leak because if you're if you have an area because you didn't design the system right and you didn't install it accordingly, you're going to have areas that are going to be too wet and some areas that are going to be too dry. And what happens is you have an area where you start seeing that its plant is beginning to go into stress. And so what people do, they just add more time, right? But there's an area that is already saturated because you don't have the right coverage. So it is important. And again, these are things that are easily uh, fixed if somebody uses the right tools.
Great, great, for sure. And so how can Wi-Fi irrigation controls help contractors create more efficient watering schedules?
This is something that it's become so accessible nowadays. Um, Back in the days when I started working in irrigation, having something like this in your home meant that it could have been thousands of dollars. But nowadays, this is it's just so accessible. It makes no sense why somebody wouldn't use it. But you know, one of the reasons I think that people don't make the adjustments, if we would make even 4 adjustments a year, in our system based on our seasons, right? Knowing when to turn it off, turn it back on, and whatnot. But a lot of times, I think people want to do the right thing, but then they get into the house and the garage is 120, 130 degrees, and they're like, I'll do it later tonight. And then they forget. If you have a controller that is on Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter how hot it is outside. You could be in the comfort of your home, sipping your favorite drink, and just grab your phone, and you can make all the changes that you need, from your couch without leaving the comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So that covers a lot of these. So you can use it to adjust to weather conditions, and you said it several times a year. It really depends on where you live too, what your weather is like. But that can cost a lot of money if you're overwatering or if you're doing things when it's unnecessary, for sure. Um, and you talked about allowing remote the system management. Um, and like depending on your system, you can customize really by your watering zones. Like you can pick. So through the systems, a special system, you're able to create different zones.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there are some systems that you could even take pictures, of
Oh,
your lawn. And so you can grab your tablet and you can say, hey, this picture is this zone, and you can make the changes again from the comfort of your couch. But the other thing that these products bring to the table is that you can also utilize ET to to make those changes for you, right? So the controller collects data once a day, and so the irrigation program for the following day is done based on whatever data the controller received the night before. So this is kind of like you being at the controller every day making changes, but all you have to do is utilize the tools at your disposal.
wow, it does it itself. So it's really just paying attention and caring enough to really fix that. And you
Absolutely.
save, and you think of how much better your lawn or your plants or anything will be based on the system, and it's so smart. So that's great. So where do PRS sprays and rotors make the biggest difference in reducing runoff and wasted water?
So this is, again, now the PRS is not something that is new. This is something that has been available. In fact, I believe states like California, Colorado, some states in the Northeast, and some parts of Texas are now requiring uh, installations to be done with pressure regulating sprinklers. Why? So picture this, right? Each rotor is kind of like a spigot, its own spigot. But when you don't have pressure regulating head, you might have one rotor that might have 55 psi, and then you're going to have another one that has 45 psi. Well, they have different pressures, which means that they're applying different amounts of water. But the same also goes if you had 100 psi and you put a rotor in there, those heavy droplets of water turn into fine mist. Of course, you get in an area where it's really windy, most of that is going to cool your lawn, but it's not really going to be utilized by your lawn. And so you add pressure regulation, it'll help you because you're going to have a more uniform application of your water. You're going to minimize mist. And so you're going to take, nature out of the equation because you're going to eliminate some of that evaporation because of the wind.
So how does that affect the sloped and compacted sites? So if it is, how does that benefit those specifically?
Well, it's not that it affects slopes or compaction by itself, right? Because if you put pressure regulation and you still run it for the wrong run times without doing cycle and soak, it's that jump in, jump out kind of application, right? So the pressure regulation by itself is not the ultimate solution, but it's how you also run your program, especially if you have slope. Then the 3 minutes that I mentioned earlier, it's probably going to be a minute, right? Because I said 3 minutes based on a flat surface. Once you have slope, then that means water, it's gravity, it's going to be working against you. So water's going to be looking for the easiest path. So it is a combination. Pressure regulation helps, but you still have to work on your programming.
The timing of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned high wind and the misting and how that happens. Properties with pressure issues. How does that
So
affect?
so if you have again a property that has high pressure. So let's say in Texas, we really like Houston, where I'm from, it's so flat. We're 50 feet above sea level. The only way we can see from a distance, we got to get on a overpass. Uh, but if you go to Colorado, Utah, California, and some places where you have mountains, uh, if you have a sprinkler system at a house at the top of the hill, and you have another house that is 200 feet down, okay, and the water tower is at the first house, there's the pressure increases, okay, as the water flows down, and so it creates that high mist that we were referring to. And so, how do you manage the pressure so the sprinkler is applying the proper amount? So you don't have to overwater one area to get all the areas even, is by applying pressure regulation.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um,
It
and
helps with the
ultimately,
pocketbook.
yeah, ultimately we're looking to save money, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that helps with your pocketbook. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had put pocketbook because it's a word I've used since I was little, and I think Louise laughed a little when we were talking about it. But it makes sense. I mean, you really want to be able to maximize um, creating this good watering system, and you don't want to gouge your pocketbook any more than you have to. So um, that is true. So this one's very interesting. So how do soil conditions, compaction, and thatch affect how water moves through a landscape?
Uh, a fantastic question. So soils, for example, there's so many different soils, and depending on what part of the country you're in, right? So if you have a sandy soil, let's say that we were by a beach town somewhere, sand is not going to allow water to kind of spread out when you're applying it. It's going to find the path of least resistance and go straight down. So we utilize the analogy of a carrot. So if you have a sandy soil and you're applying water, it's going to absorb it faster, but it's not going to spread out evenly. It's going to try to go straight down, hence the shape of the carrot. If you have a clay soil, it's more like a potato. It's quite the opposite of sand. When you apply your watering, that's where you have to be the most careful to prevent the runoff. But it's represented kind of with using a potato, right? Because when you apply the water, instead of trying to go straight down, it kind of spreads out because it's having a challenge being absorbed. Um, and so we use the potato as an example. And so depending on the soil conditions, and there's things that you can do, you can actually take a soil probe, and check your soil. And that also is one of the things that you can utilize when setting up your schedule. When you have a Wi-Fi controller, you can actually program and say, hey, this zone, it's sandy, this zone is clay, this one's clay loam, this one's sandy loam. And the system is going to automatically make those adjustments based on the data you input into the system.
That's interesting. That's great. So the next one we have is thatch can block water, and I did not know what thatch is. So I don't, but you explained it to me yesterday when we were talking. So I was hoping you could explain it to everybody what thatch is, but they probably all know. But
Yeah.
for those who don't,
So thatch is just organic matter, right? So like, if somebody's mowing their lawn and they don't bag their clippings and you just start leaving those clumps in there, eventually you start creating like a mesh. And so when you're running an irrigation system, or you even if you're trying to water by hand, that compaction of that organic matter, it's just preventing the water from going where it needs to be. And so that's why it's important to make sure that if you have a lawn, that you also try to keep it healthy.
That makes perfect sense. No, and I think I've been guilty of that for sure.
I
In
think
my
we
lawn
all have.
care. Uh, and how about site conditions that can affect run times?
Yes, I mean, site conditions, right? If you have an area where you have slope, and again, as I mentioned earlier, in Texas, we only have slope unless we have a berm or something. Uh, but if you have an area that is full of mature trees, and it's full of roots. You have an area again that, depending on soils, you have to take into consideration all of these things, right? When you're looking at a site, and all of these things affect your run times. If I have an area that there's some trees in there that are 50 years old, and they cover a lot of area, I'm not going to water that area the same, because it doesn't need to be watered as much as an area that is in full sun. So I think those would be, some conditions that if you have slope, you have shade, you have sun, all of those need to be considered. And as you were alluding to earlier, that's why you don't want to just say, hey, 10 minutes, all the zones, right? You have to take into account the conditions of the site.
That makes sense. One thing that someone had told me, and you can confirm this, or it could become it's a myth potentially, but I was told that whether it's a bush or a tree and you're trying to water it, you're trying to give it some care, you can water, the root system goes out as far as like the branches do. And so you don't have to water right at the base of the tree. You can water all the way out to be able to have effective watering. Is that true?
Absolutely. So most people feel that they need to water at the base of the plant. And just like any other muscle, if you're just applying water right by the root, you're not making the root work for it. And so if you're keeping it just moist enough to where it could make it, it's not say, hey, I don't, I don't need to go out. It's just like a human being. If you're sitting on the couch, you have to make the effort to get up, do some exercise so you can stay healthy. Plant is no different. If you're just giving it enough to where it's happy and comfortable, it's not going to expand its root mass, and then it's not going to be as healthy. And so when you go to a drought condition, then it's being affected. So the 50 to 75% rule of the canopy of the tree, it is important to follow because as you spray that larger area around the canopy, all of a sudden those roots go, okay, while I'm sitting down, this is not as comfortable. This is not my favorite couch, so I need to go find something to do. And so those roots start moving, looking for that water. And that's why you have to go 50, 75% of the canopy to get the roots to do their part, to get them to do some exercise.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Our contractors may already know that, but some of our homeowners may not. So, I appreciate you taking the time to answer that. So now we're off to our wetting agents. So what role can wetting agents play in helping landscapes retain moisture and support healthier plant growth?
So yes, wetting agents, being that these are some agronomy tools, and it's not my area of expertise, but I will say that wetting agents are excellent tools that we are able to use in a landscaping. So what they do is, let's say you're going to a drought and your soil is compacted, and you apply some wetting agents. Everybody actually should have at least some granular wetting agents in the truck. where you can spray. And what this does is it helps breaks down, for lack of a better term, uh, some of that compaction, allowing the moisture to seep in. And so when you're applying your fertilizers and you water in them, they also help to retain more moisture, allowing those products to work and giving the plant enough time to have access to those nutrients so you can have a healthier plant uh, system. That's kind of like my answer for weighting agents. That's about as much as I know. Don't, let's not go too deep.
Well, maybe you can answer this, like how you said there's some granular like wetting agents. What do you know the types of wetting agents, or is it all pretty much like a granular thing that helps
No, no, there's
distribute?
liquids, and I mentioned granular because it's the easiest thing where you can keep a bag in the truck and you can just spray, but they are in liquid form as well.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
For sure. Is there anything else you want to add to wetting agents? I know that this isn't your area.
I mean, it's a great tool that I think we should be using more, and I don't think we're utilizing it enough. And so it's something that I would highly recommend. It actually, believe it or not, it helps save water, right? Because it allows the system to hold moisture for a longer period of time, allowing the landscape to use that moisture instead of just letting it evaporate.
That's great information. So we're going to be switching gears a little bit. So how do rain and freeze sensors protect a landscape while helping clients avoid unnecessary water use?
You know, one of the things that we're always talk to our people is the importance of safety and how uh, safety is such a top priority for us. We want our employees to go home with all the pieces that they came in with in the morning, right? And so rain sensors go above and beyond just cutting off the water after a rain or cutting off the water after a freezing condition. They're actually safety features that I don't understand and why they're not utilized as much as they should. Just like any other tool, based on the part of the country, you do have to adjust it accordingly. For example, in Texas, because of our humidity, if I set up a rain sensor at an eighth of an inch, it'll never come on in the morning because our 90% moisture would not allow that system to come on, and then you kill your plants because the irrigation will never come on. And so in that area, you have to adjust them to like a half an inch. But in other areas that are more arid, that's not the case. However, there was a case, I believe it was in Texas, where we had a freezing condition. It wasn't raining, and the business did not have a freeze sensor. And there was a rotor that was not adjusted properly, and it was actually spraying the road. And that system came on, watered the road, it turned into black ice. Somebody, it wasn't raining. Yes, it was freezing temperatures, but it hadn't rained. And so they drove into the black ice. They crashed, and that person lost their life. All over an $150 piece, right? And so that's
Wow.
how important freeze sensors and rain sensors are. And again, they play an important part of conserving water, but they're also a safety feature. There are multiple stories that, this is not the only situation when something like that's happened, just because somebody thought that they were saving some money on $150, unit.
Yeah, you can't really put a price on the safety of
No,
that for sure.
no.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, that's a sad story, and hopefully people will be able to, with this information, be able to make the right decision when it comes to purchasing rain and freeze sensors for their landscaping needs. Um, and I think you covered everything on this slide. So I'm going to
I
move
think
on to
so.
the next one, which is, why should drainage be part of every conversation about irrigation efficiency and long-term landscape health?
So this is one of those other topics that they go hand in hand for a healthier landscaping. I think that in a lot of cases, drainage is underutilized, um, and it's not taking into consideration. But we had multiple stories where we get calls from a customer and they're complaining about the irrigation system, they're complaining about the products. And I remember we got a call from a customer saying that the smart system that they had purchased was not working and they were losing all these shrubs. And sure enough, as soon as I pull up to the job site, I could tell that they had a drainage problem that they needed to address. But also right away, I saw the shrubs and they were not partially dead. This was not shrubs that you were gonna, yell clear and hope that they were gonna come to life. I mean, they were dead, dead to the point to where when I went to pull one out, the stench of rotting roots, all because we didn't have the proper drainage. And again, plants are living organisms, just like it's like if somebody was to take us and submerge us in a barrel and put the top on it and they don't let us come to out for air, right? Depending on how healthy we are, that's how long we're going to last, but it's not a long time. Plants are no different. Plants, while they need water just like we do, but they also need oxygen to survive. And so if we overwater them or if we put them in an area where they're going to be saturated because of lack of drainage, they're going to die. I have one more story that this one we're talking about pocketbooks and how they can be affected. Um, and this customer actually uses this practice until this day because I've seen the pipes in the back of his truck. And so these guys were working on a beautiful residence estate, actually, and they were putting in 200-gallon trees, and the beautiful design. I mean, for a residential job, it was like $1.5 million, and this was quite a few years ago. In today's market, that's probably around three. And they needed cranes to move these trees to this area, and they had lost one tree. And back then, each of these trees were $10,000. So you can imagine how big they were, plus the crane to move them in and out. And they said, "Hey, look, we think it's the irrigation. We put in water, but we put fertilizer. We're doing this and that. We're trying to take care of it, but we lost this $10,000 trees, and we have all these other $10,000 bills in here that we're trying to figure out what to do." So when I got there, I said, "You don't have an irrigation problem. You have a drainage problem." I said, "I know what to do." I said, "I'll be right back. Here's what I need you to do." I said, "I need you to get that tractor with the auger, and I need you to drill a hole in between all of these trees." And we went and we got some 12-inch pipes. We put those in the ground, in those holes. And then we took some sump pumps. And as soon as we dropped the sump pumps and we plugged them in, there was a 2-inch solid cylinder of water coming out of those pipes. Why? Because when they dug the soil, they created a bowl. And so when it was raining, when the system was running, it was the low spot. And so runoff was taking place, right? That soil condition where the trees, it was allowing water to drain at the bottom, but once it got to the bottom, it had nowhere to go. And so those trees were drowning because there was too much water sitting at the bottom. They couldn't breathe. And as soon as we went in there and we put those pipes and those sump pumps, I think he waited 2 years before he went and removed them because they wanted to make sure that the trees were going to make it. And so we were able to help the customer save tens of thousands of dollars by having the proper drainage. So it's drainage,
Wow.
in my opinion, important. I think it is to keep a healthy irrigation system.
Absolutely. How many trees do you think they lost?
They lost one, but
Oh,
they had three that they were pretty close of losing. But as soon as we put the drainage in there, so that was, and the other ones were stressed, but not as bad, because of where they were, right from the area.
wow. That's a success story. I mean, you think of like one tree, it's kind of like collateral damage when you don't know how to drain. And, obviously they needed some education on that. Um, yeah, it's so important to prevent standing water too because of all the like the insects. You think of all the things that you're creating, the algae. You can create a lot of like craziness if you are not able to have proper drainage. And I'm sure that you know much more about that than I do.
Well, in some situations, like in this case, right, it wasn't obvious. You couldn't see it. But
No, you.
when, he started explaining what they did on the site, I mean, they dug this big trench and then they dropped these large trees and you have this fresh soil. I mean, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with your expertise and your years of experience, I'm sure, well, it wouldn't have been obvious to a lot of people, but that's good to know for sure. So I had a rain barrel. This is kind of funny. And it did not work out very well for me, but now I may try it again. So how can rain barrels, recycled water sources, artificial turf, and hardscapes create low water outdoor spaces?
So for some of this, I do have some mixed feelings. Um, but I will say that rainwater harvesting, when properly used, uh, can be a great resource. We work on some projects when I was a specification manager where we were look at an elementary school and a high school, and we look at the condensation from the air conditioning and how much water it's able to produce, right? And we sometimes we don't realize how much water, but an elementary school produce, I think, somewhere between 100 to 150,000 gallons a month. A high school produces almost double that. And the only reason is because in a high school you open and close the doors more. In elementary school, typically they open the doors in the morning and in the afternoon, so you're not allowing outside moisture as much. But 100, 150,000 gallons a month is still a lot of water, right? Um, and so we would take the condensation and the plumbers ran the line straight into the rainwater harvesting tanks. And then we also had some of the storm water draining into the tank with some makeup water, of course, for drought years. Um, and so we were able to utilize the condensation, collect some of the rainwater, and utilize it to save the customer money. I mean, in there are some areas now that, depending on the size of the state or the size of the building that you're planning to build, that holding water is a mandatory, right? Where you have to have a detention pond or retention pond. But if you're building a beautiful state, you don't want a big pond, or that might take all of your lawn. And so we work on projects where we might have a 200,000 gallon storage by just running pipes across from beginning to end of the property. And again, collect the condensation, collect the storm rain, and then we will water the irrigation, the landscaping with that water. Customer can utilize some of that stuff, also to watch cars, to do some other things. And so when properly used, yes, they work. I think a lot of times, just like anything else, we get excited and we don't follow through and we only do part of it. And then it's like, we lose interest. Um, and then when you look at some of these other products, right, like turf, artificial turf, well, artificial turf will help reduce some water usage. My uh, feelings about it are I like more natural things. I like live plants, and artificial turf increases the temperature. And I was talking to a customer one time, and I mean, that's how he makes his living by installing artificial turf. And I'm not saying it's an evil thing or a bad thing, right? So I don't want to get you in trouble. Um, but this is how he made his money. And he said he had a Chihuahua. And he said that every time he opened the door to let it go outside, he said he would have fun at the Chihuahua's expense because every time that Chihuahua would get into the artificial turf, it was so hot that it just kept pouncing up and down because
Oh,
because it was so
the poor
hot.
baby.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a story about artificial turf too. My kids all played on soccer fields and my daughter came and she's like, she played a lot of the game and it's hot. It was 120 degrees on her shoes were melting. So if the shoes are melting, you kind of wonder like what else is happening there. But I know that artificial turf can be used in many different areas too, and they're making the artificial turf better so that the heat is not as big of a problem in some areas. And I live in the north, and so artificial turf 9 months out of the year is actually not a problem, but it's the summer months that kind of kill you. But um,
And
yeah,
there are its uses and applications, right? I've seen a place called Field of Dreams where they have, replicas of different ballparks, and children can go play. But I will tell you that they do a mixture, right? They have natural turf in a combination with some high traffic areas of artificial turf. But even then, you can tell the difference when you step into the natural grass and the artificial grass. Even when you're wearing shoes, you can feel the temperature difference right away as you step from one to the other.
yeah,
So again, it has its applications, right? Um,
yes,
Hardscape, I mean, look, I love to grill. I love to do stuff outside, and yes, we should have some uh, hard surfaces where we could do certain things. But I think that we have to do again our part to make sure that we also utilize some products where we have enough drainage, enough used product that can allow water to seep through. Think about an area, a driveway, a house. So every time we add a hard surface into a natural area, well, before we put that hard surface in there, when it rains, that area, absorbs some of that moisture into the soil, um, keeping those plants healthier and prevent runoff, prevent flooding. And so as we add hard surfaces, if we don't do uh, the right things, then we're creating runoff. We're creating, we're taking that area that used to absorb some moisture, and now we're taking that away. And then when it rains, I mean, that water just runs off. And so
yeah.
again, we have to be smart about what we do and how do we utilize the tools, so we can have some healthier landscaping and we can save some water.
Right. And hardscapes, a lot of times, like it's an afterthought. It wasn't the original part of your home or it wasn't part of the original structure. So it is a big deal for having drainage or runoff. And it can actually affect your neighbors too, because if you're not, it'll go to the lowest point. So if your neighbor is at the lowest point, then there's some issues there. So we definitely, I think by creating areas that you can have proper drainage and irrigation is really important when you're considering adding
Yeah,
hardscapes to your.
don't get me started there because I've seen people get pretty loud, when somebody's flooding their yard, right? And rightly
Right.
so.
That makes it,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So we're going to move on. So, how can contractors explain the value of smart watering upgrades to clients who are mainly focused on upfront costs?
You know, this reminds me of a story. Um, a customer friend of mine came in and he said, "Man, you won't believe what happened." And obviously you can see the concern. I said, "What happened?" He says, "We just got a $26,000 water bill." And of course, all of a sudden I was concerned and shocked. And I said, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, we actually had a leak, a break in the main line, and the main line happened to be where the break took place. It was by the curb on the street, which happened to be right next to the drainage, the storm drainage.
Oh, storm drain. Yeah.
So the main line was leaking, and it was just the water just overflowing over the curb and going straight into the drain. So there was no water on the site that you could see that it was obvious that this was a decent sized property. There was no area that was, where the grass was flooded or plants were dying because they were drowning. It was just a break in the main. And now it doesn't always happens like that, but this,
Stream
I
of
thought it
it.
was, yeah, I thought it was interesting. And if they would have had a smart controller with a flow meter or a flow sensor, that system would have shut off the water, would have sent the customer a text, an email, or both, or multiple people to let them know that there was a problem on site.
Wow.
And not only would have informed them that there was an issue on site, it would have actually taken action if they programmed the system to do so. Or they could have just programmed it to turn it off and not even send them a message, right? But if it was me managing the property, I would want to know so I could go address it. And so, I mean, how do you justify $26,000? And that's just one site. And so if we go across this beautiful nation and start looking at how many times that's happened and how many times people have overpaid, I think that pretty much just answers itself, right?
Yeah, it'll pay for itself if you do, if you do it right.
Yes. And it can, I mean, you can save uh, water, you can save labor, you can save. Uh, it's utilizing a flow meter, utilizing a smart controller. It's like buying insurance. Okay, you probably don't want to pay for it, but you have to because when something bad happens, you want to have insurance. If if you put an irrigation system and you don't utilize technology that is available today, it's like you're buying a car without insurance. To me also you can have the best irrigation system and it's like, but if you're not using technology, flow meters, flow sensors, moisture sensors, ET, it's kind of like buying a brand new Expedition or Suburban Platinum. And notice, I'm staying American here, right? Uh, but if you don't have any tires, any wheels on it, that car's not going to go anywhere.
Just nowhere.
And
Yeah.
so you can have the best irrigation system, but if you don't put some of these cool tools that are available, uh, you're missing out. So get some wheels.
Get some good wheels that work.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that it really does pay for itself because it just takes one time of regret, And it just makes you feel better. It's safety. It makes you feel like this is all covered. So I think that
absolutely.
wow. Well, I think we have a little time for questions, but I know that we've had the chat open for this, so I don't think we have any questions. So I really Louise, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say before we depart?
Well, I was going to say, oh, wow, I didn't know we were that good that we didn't get any questions.
Well, people can follow up if they want to get a hold of Louise. He's at Heritage, and I'm of course an outdoor
Absolutely.
coffee shop, and we're welcome any questions that you have after the call for sure. But Louis, thank you so much for your time. I learned so much today, and I appreciate you being able to be here to answer questions and be such a great resource. And this is sponsored by Heritage Family of Companies, which is a premier sponsor of our actual site as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Very humble for the opportunity. Thank you to you and your listeners for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we'll be in touch. We'll talk soon. And thank you for everyone who joined. Again, this is on demand in 24 to 48 hours. And you can share the link with anyone. And I know we'll be sharing it and it'll go out on all of our channels. So thanks again and have a great day, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Louise.
you.